AI is just going to fix all our problems and there's no reason to study languages anymore. That's kind of a common conception that's going around online. A lot of people think, oh, there's not going to be any need to learn any languages. The AI can just translate for all of us. We're not going to have any jobs. There's no reason to study a language in 2025. And my response to that would be, me personally, I speak fluent Mandarin Chinese. I speak some Chinese dialect. I'm a Chinese dialect. I speak some Japanese. And as someone who speaks multiple languages, I would say at this current time, that's not a big concern. Maybe when the internet got bigger, when Google Translate got so good, there was also people saying this kind of stuff. There's no reason to learn a language. Translation can just be done by our phones, by technology. There's no reason for someone to know two languages. And I think that's a big misconception. Why? Because we've already had these technologies to do translation, and there's still people learning languages, and there's still niches that you can get into using these languages. At my first two jobs so far, I've extensively used Chinese and my bilingual status to be able to get these jobs. And why is that? You might ask yourself. If there's translation, why is there still a need for people who speak languages? I've traveled to China with my family actually, and they don't speak Chinese. And what I realized is everywhere we went, it would be most beneficial for me to be there with everyone. Yeah, people could use their translation machines, their translation apps, but it wasn't nearly as quick. I was there, I was able to facilitate everything. Ordering food, asking questions, asking directions. Something gets messed up at the train ticket, with the train ticket. Who's gonna figure it out? You pull out your phone, half the words, maybe not half the words. That's being a little aggressive with what I'm saying. We'll be realistic. Maybe 1/5 of the words are translated incorrectly. It says it in a weird way. You can't use your colloquialisms when you're speaking. You can't just speak off the cuff when you're talking to a translator. When you're talking to a translation app, you need to speak very specifically. You can't say like, hey, what time does this thing end? You couldn't say something like, hey, what time? You would have to say, hey, what time does this event end? You have to use like the precise wording. You have to say it in a concise way. And it's just not as flexible as a native speaker or someone who speaks both languages, because they're gonna hear you say it like that and filter it in a way that's easier for the other person to understand. Another thing is that I've seen some of these translation goggles, some of these translation apps, they're never gonna be as fast, or maybe they could be, I don't know. But I don't think they're as fast as someone who's actually bilingual. Why do you think all the world leaders still have their translators by their sides? They're not just using technology. There's more precision, there's more clarity, there's more expression of colloquialisms. You can speak more freely if there's a translator in the middle. And if you're gonna hire someone for a position that maybe is a cross-national position, you wanna know that they kind of understand the culture you're coming from, all of that. If someone hires someone who's studied Chinese to a high level, that company is going to know that this person has some level of cultural understanding with how the Chinese do things, or whatever country. I mean, if you speak Spanish, maybe a Latin American country, they would know you know something about their culture. It's just they know that to learn a language, you have to have some cultural understanding, and that just makes things mesh better. Chinese people do business differently than maybe American people do business, and so on and so on. European people do business differently. So they know that you've understood their culture to an extent, and being able to have the language ability, it just is proof of that. And these translation apps as well, they don't always translate things as fast. What do I mean? The sentence structure in many languages is different. I know in Japanese, the verb comes at the end of the sentence, but in English, the verb normally comes in the middle of the sentence. So a translation app is going to need to wait for the entire sentence to finish before it can spit out its translation. And then if we're going into maybe the structure of things, if you're saying this happened and then, or because of this, then this. Well, some languages say then this because of this. So then we're talking on the sentence level. The translation app has to hear maybe 2 full sentences of speech before it can even spit out the appropriate translation. But if you're a native speaker or you understand the language, your response is always going to be quicker. You're going to be seeing where it's going. So not just from a translation perspective, but you being able to converse with the people. If you know the language, you're just going to be a lot more on the ball. They're going to be saying something. You're going to get kind of the context they're using too. You understand their language. You're listening in on how they're saying it. You can kind of tell if someone's saying something tongue-in-cheek. You can tell if someone's saying something with a little bit of humor. You can tell if someone's very serious. That's kind of removed when you're looking at translation machines. And yeah, the AI might be able to convey some of those emotions if it's like someone speaks Chinese, it automatically puts it in English, and it tries to add in the humor aspect. But still, you're going to have to wait for the full sentence to be over for the translation. I think that's completely unavoidable. Is if you're the person who understands it, it's going to just be a lot more smooth than anything that technology can do. So those are kind of my general thoughts. Yes, AI will change some things. Actually, I think AI will be a big thing for us to use to learn languages. You can use these as tools when you're studying. So I think that's going to be actually a big benefit to learning languages quicker. I think that there's maybe some very rote, just doing translation, those types of things, like maybe translating an article from English into Chinese or something. Yeah, that's going to go away probably. There's not going to, since a robot can do it so good, the prices are going to be dirt cheap if you're trying to do that type of work. So yeah, those types of things. But other things like actually working and then having your primary skill, but then having Chinese or a different language kind of as the vector that gets you in the door, then you're able to work in that second language, but also know another language fluently. That's kind of really where the benefits of language come in. It's not so much as just purely knowing it, but pairing that with a different skill and then being able to be a comprehensive business person or engineer or whatever you do using that second language. So those are my general thoughts. Don't give up on studying languages just because of the whole AI revolution.